Every second of every day, billions of people touch a piece of technology without ever thinking about the tiny machines hidden deep inside it. Smartphones, laptops, cars, fighter jets, satellites, banking systems, artificial intelligence, hospitals, power grids, even the internet itself. Modern civilization now runs on something smaller than a fingernail: semiconductor chips. These microscopic pieces of silicon quietly power nearly everything humans depend on in the 21st century. And while most people never notice them, governments around the world have started realizing something terrifying: whoever controls these tiny chips may eventually control the future global order itself. That realization is why the United States and China are now fighting one of the most dangerous technological battles in modern history. A battle many analysts are calling the beginning of a new Cold War. Unlike the old Cold War fought with nuclear missiles and armies, this new conflict is being fought through technology, artificial intelligence, supply chains, and economic power. And at the center of everything sits the semiconductor chip. To understand why this matters so much, you first have to understand what chips actually do. Semiconductor chips act like the brains of modern machines. Every digital command, every internet connection, every AI calculation, every financial transaction, every GPS signal, and every advanced military operation depends on chips processing enormous amounts of information at incredible speed. Without semiconductors, modern society would collapse almost instantly. Cars would stop functioning properly. Airplanes would lose critical systems. Communication networks would fail. Factories would shut down. Banks could freeze. Hospitals would struggle to operate life-saving equipment. Entire economies would grind to a halt. During the COVID-era chip shortages, the world got a small preview of this vulnerability when automobile factories, electronics companies, and supply chains faced massive disruption because there simply were not enough chips available globally. That crisis shocked governments everywhere because it revealed how deeply modern civilization depended on a technology most people barely understood. Reuters.com. For decades, oil was considered the world's most important strategic resource. Countries fought wars over oil. Economies rose and collapsed based on energy supplies. But now, many experts believe semiconductor chips have become even more important than oil itself. Why? Because oil powers machines, but chips control them. The future economy will depend increasingly on artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous weapons, quantum computing, advanced communications, and digital infrastructure. Every one of those technologies requires powerful semiconductors. That means whoever dominates advanced chip production could gain enormous economic, military, and geopolitical advantages for decades. And this is exactly what triggered growing fear inside Washington and Beijing. American officials began realizing China's rapid technological rise could eventually challenge U.S. dominance globally. Chinese leaders realized dependence on Western chips created dangerous vulnerabilities for Beijing's future ambitions. Slowly, both superpowers started viewing semiconductors not as ordinary business products anymore, but as strategic weapons capable of shaping the future balance of world power. The semiconductor industry itself is unbelievably complex. Designing advanced chips requires elite engineering talent, expensive research, and cutting-edge software. Manufacturing those chips requires machines so advanced they are almost science fiction. Some semiconductor factories cost tens of billions of dollars to build. The process involves atomic-level precision using ultraviolet light systems, chemical engineering, and ultra-clean environments where even microscopic dust particles can destroy production. Only a handful of companies on Earth possess the ability to produce the world's most advanced semiconductors. That concentration of power makes chips incredibly valuable, and incredibly vulnerable. Governments realized that if geopolitical conflict disrupted semiconductor supply chains, the consequences could be catastrophic for global economies and military systems alike. This is why the relationship between the United States and China began changing dramatically over technology. For years, globalization connected both economies deeply. American companies depended on Chinese manufacturing. China depended heavily on Western technology. But as China grew stronger economically and technologically, American leaders became increasingly worried about losing long-term dominance in key industries shaping the future. Artificial intelligence became a major concern. AI systems require massive computing power driven by advanced chips. Whoever controls the most powerful semiconductors may eventually dominate AI development itself. And whoever dominates AI could gain enormous military, economic, and surveillance advantages globally. Suddenly, semiconductor chips were no longer just commercial products. They became the foundation of future military power, intelligence capabilities, cyber warfare systems, and economic control. China also understood the stakes clearly. Beijing launched massive national programs investing billions into semiconductor development because Chinese leaders feared dependence on Western chips could become a strategic weakness. The Chinese government viewed technological independence as essential for long-term national security and global influence. Meanwhile, Washington increasingly viewed China's rise in technology as a direct challenge to American leadership. The result was a growing confrontation where both sides believed losing the chip race could weaken their future power dramatically. And once governments start believing technology determines national survival, economic competition quickly transforms into geopolitical conflict. The world is now watching this transformation happen in real time. Trade wars, export bans, sanctions, technology restrictions, military tensions surrounding Taiwan, corporate pressure on semiconductor companies. Everything connects back to the same deeper fear: control over advanced technology may determine which nation dominates the future world order. This is why analysts call it a new Cold War. Because unlike previous economic rivalries, this conflict is not simply about money anymore. It is about survival, power, and the future direction of human civilization itself. And perhaps the most shocking part of all is how invisible this battlefield appears to ordinary people. There are no giant tanks rolling through cities. No nuclear missiles crossing the sky. Instead, the most important battle of the 21st century may be happening silently inside laboratories, semiconductor factories, data centers, and supply chains most people never even see. A war over microscopic chips capable of controlling artificial intelligence, global economies, military systems, and digital life itself. A war where the most powerful weapon in the world is no longer measured by explosions, but by who controls the tiny technology powering everything around us. For years, many American leaders believed China would remain the world's factory, powerful economically, but still dependent on Western technology and innovation. Washington assumed the United States would continue dominating the industries shaping the future while China focused mainly on manufacturing products designed elsewhere. But then something happened that completely changed the way American officials viewed Beijing. China stopped trying to simply manufacture the future. It started trying to control it. And when Washington finally realized how fast China's technological rise was accelerating, shock quickly turned into fear. Because suddenly, the United States was no longer looking at a developing competitor. It was looking at a potential technological superpower capable of challenging American dominance in some of the most important industries on Earth. The transformation happened faster than many expected. Over the past 2 decades, China invested enormous amounts of money into artificial intelligence, telecommunications, robotics, electric vehicles, quantum computing, supercomputers, renewable energy systems, and advanced semiconductor development. Beijing launched national technology plans worth hundreds of billions of dollars designed to reduce dependence on Western systems and create Chinese-controlled alternatives. One of the most important strategies became known globally as Made in China 2025, a massive effort to dominate high-tech industries critical for future economic and military power. Reuters.com: American officials watched these developments carefully, but many initially underestimated how quickly China could advance. Then came Huawei. The Chinese telecommunications giant became one of the clearest examples of Beijing's technological ambitions. Huawei rapidly expanded across global markets with advanced 5G infrastructure systems competing directly against Western companies. Suddenly, countries around the world were considering Chinese technology for the future backbone of global communications networks. Washington viewed this as more than simple business competition. American intelligence agencies warned that Chinese-controlled telecom infrastructure could eventually create national security risks, surveillance vulnerabilities, and geopolitical leverage for Beijing. The United States began pressuring allies aggressively to block Huawei from critical networks, arguing the company's ties to the Chinese government posed unacceptable risks. BBC.com, but Huawei was only part of a much larger trend frightening Washington. China's rise in artificial intelligence became another major concern. Chinese companies and research institutions advanced rapidly in facial recognition systems, machine learning, big data analysis, and AI-powered surveillance technologies. Beijing openly declared ambitions to become the global leader in artificial intelligence within the coming decades. American officials realized AI would not only shape economic competition, it would shape military power, intelligence operations, cyber warfare, and geopolitical influence itself. Whoever dominated AI could eventually gain enormous strategic advantages globally. And because AI depends heavily on advanced semiconductor chips, technology competition suddenly became deeply connected to national security. Supercomputers added even more anxiety inside Washington. China made major advances in high-performance computing systems capable of supporting scientific research, military simulations, AI development, and strategic cyber capabilities. American intelligence officials worried that Chinese advances in computing power could eventually support more sophisticated weapons systems and intelligence operations. At the same time, accusations of cyber espionage and intellectual property theft intensified tensions between both countries dramatically. U.S. officials repeatedly accused Chinese actors of stealing trade secrets, corporate technology, and sensitive research through hacking campaigns and cyber operations targeting Western companies and institutions. CNN.com, Beijing denied many of the accusations publicly, but mistrust continued growing year after year. Inside Washington, the mindset toward China began changing fundamentally. For decades, economic engagement with Beijing was seen largely as beneficial for globalization and trade. But now, American policymakers increasingly viewed China's technological rise through the lens of strategic competition instead of cooperation. Semiconductor chips became one of the clearest examples of this shift. Officials realized advanced chips powered artificial intelligence, military systems, communications networks, quantum research, and surveillance technologies simultaneously. That meant allowing China unrestricted access to the world's most advanced semiconductors could eventually strengthen Beijing's military and geopolitical capabilities dramatically. Suddenly, chips were no longer just commercial products. They became strategic assets tied directly to future global power. This fear intensified because China was not simply buying Western technology anymore. Beijing was rapidly developing its own alternatives. Chinese companies began competing aggressively in electric vehicles, battery technology, renewable energy, and digital infrastructure globally. In some sectors, Chinese innovation started moving faster than many Western competitors expected. Washington worried that if current trends continued, America could eventually lose leadership in industries defining the future economy itself. That fear transformed economic competition into something much deeper, a struggle over who would dominate the technologies shaping the 21st century. American politicians from both major parties increasingly agreed on one thing: China's rise represented a serious strategic challenge. This rare bipartisan consensus changed U.S. policy dramatically. Technology restrictions tightened. Semiconductor export controls expanded. Investment screening increased. Sanctions targeted Chinese firms connected to sensitive sectors. And alliances with Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and European partners became more focused on protecting advanced technologies from Chinese access. TheGuardian.com, Beijing viewed these actions as deliberate attempts to contain China's rise. Chinese officials accused Washington of trying to preserve global dominance unfairly by blocking Chinese progress technologically and economically. This perception fueled even greater Chinese investment into domestic semiconductor production and technological independence. The more America restricted China, the more determined Beijing became to reduce reliance on Western systems entirely. And slowly, the relationship between the world's two largest economies began shifting from cooperation toward confrontation. Businesses worldwide suddenly found themselves trapped inside a growing geopolitical technology war. Companies that once operated globally without major political pressure now faced difficult choices about supply chains, research partnerships, technology access, and national security regulations. Semiconductor firms became central players in international politics. Governments pressured corporations. Alliances shifted around technology. And ordinary products like computer chips became symbols of national survival and strategic power. The deeper the competition expanded, the clearer one reality became. Washington no longer viewed China simply as an economic competitor. It viewed Beijing as a technological rival capable of reshaping the global balance of power itself. And once that realization fully took hold inside the American political system, the era of normal economic competition between the United States and China was effectively over. The new Cold War had already begun, and at its center stood a battle over technology powerful enough to shape the future of the entire world. The moment Washington realized China's technological rise could eventually challenge American global dominance, the United States made a decision that would change the future of the world economy forever. America was no longer going to treat semiconductor chips like ordinary business products. It was going to treat them like strategic weapons. And with that decision, the global chip war officially began. What followed was not a traditional war fought with tanks or missiles. It was a war fought through sanctions, export bans, economic pressure, alliances, and control over the most advanced technology on Earth. A silent conflict capable of reshaping global trade, artificial intelligence, military power, and the future balance of world leadership itself. The first major shots in this technological war came through aggressive export controls targeting China's semiconductor industry. Washington announced sweeping restrictions preventing Chinese companies from accessing the world's most advanced chips and the specialized equipment needed to manufacture them. American officials argued these measures were necessary for national security. They warned that advanced semiconductors could help China accelerate military artificial intelligence, cyber warfare systems, surveillance technologies, and next-generation weapons development. Reuters.com, but Beijing viewed the move very differently. Chinese leaders accused Washington of launching economic warfare designed to cripple China's technological future before it could fully compete with the United States globally. At the center of the conflict were some of the most powerful companies in the modern world. NVIDIA became one of the biggest targets because its advanced AI chips powered everything from machine learning systems to supercomputers. American restrictions blocked the sale of some of NVIDIA's most advanced processors to Chinese buyers. Intel faced similar pressure regarding sensitive semiconductor technologies. Meanwhile, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, better known as TSMC, became one of the most strategically important companies on Earth because it produced many of the world's most advanced chips. WSJ.com, and perhaps the most critical company of all was ASML in the Netherlands. ASML controlled the extremely advanced lithography machines required to manufacture cutting-edge semiconductors. These machines use ultraviolet light systems so complex and precise that only ASML can currently produce them at scale. Without access to ASML equipment, China's ability to manufacture the most advanced chips became severely limited. Washington understood this perfectly. The United States began pressuring allies aggressively to join the semiconductor restrictions against Beijing. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and especially the Netherlands faced enormous diplomatic pressure from Washington to limit China's access to advanced chip technologies and manufacturing equipment. BBC.com, the strategy was clear: isolate China from the global semiconductor supply chain before Beijing could fully catch up technologically. American officials believed slowing China's semiconductor progress could delay Chinese advances in artificial intelligence, military systems, quantum computing, and surveillance technologies for years. But the chip war created enormous tension inside the global business world. Semiconductor supply chains were deeply interconnected across multiple countries. American companies depended on Asian manufacturing. Chinese factories produced critical components for global electronics industries. European firms supplied specialized tools and chemicals. Suddenly, businesses found themselves trapped between geopolitical superpowers. Companies that once focused mainly on profits now faced national security restrictions, export bans, political pressure, and fears of retaliation from both Washington and Beijing simultaneously. The world economy itself began fracturing around technology competition. China reacted with growing anger and urgency. Beijing called the American restrictions technological containment, designed to stop China's peaceful rise artificially. Chinese leaders accelerated massive investments into domestic semiconductor development, offering billions in government support for local chip companies, research institutions, and manufacturing infrastructure. TheGuardian.com, the message from Beijing was simple: if America blocked China from accessing advanced technology, China would eventually build its own alternatives instead.